Sometimes, God lets two paths cross in a way that seems like an accident. But it is never an accident. It is the moment he starts to mend a broken heart. The sun was warm on the back of Anna Blythe's neck as her buggy bumped along the dusty road. She was coming into a new town, a place called Cedar Ridge. All around her the land was wide and open, but Anna felt small and closed up inside. She was the new schoolteacher, or she would be once she arrived. Her hands, hidden in the folds of her simple dress, were clenched tight. She carried a heavy secret in her heart, a fear that had followed her all the way from the life she had run from. She did not see the deep rut in the road until it was too late. The front wheel of her buggy hit it with a loud crack. The wood splintered. The world tilted. Anna let out a small cry as she was thrown from the seat, landing in the soft dirt of the road. For a moment she just lay there, the wind knocked out of her, dust coating her clothes. Fear, her old companion, wrapped around her chest. She was alone. She was hurt. And she had nowhere to hide. At that same moment, a man on a big horse was riding down the trail. His name was Elias Ward. He was a ranch hand, and he was in a hurry to get back to the ranch after fixing a broken fence. He was not looking at the road ahead as he should have been. His mind was on his work. His horse rounded a bend, and there, right in his path, was a fallen woman and a broken buggy. There was no time to stop. Elias pulled hard on the reins, his horse skidding to the side to avoid trampling her. But he could not avoid a collision. The shoulder of his horse bumped against the broken buggy with a thud, and Elias himself was thrown from the saddle. He landed heavily not far from where Anna lay. Silence returned to the road, broken only by the puffing of the horses. Elias was the first to move. He pushed himself up, his hat gone, his clothes dusty. His first thought was not for himself but for the woman. He saw her on the ground, her eyes wide with shock and fear. A deep shame washed over him. "Ma'am," he said, his voice rough with worry. He scrambled to his feet and rushed over, kneeling in the dust beside her. "Ma'am, I am so sorry. I was not watching where I was going. Are you hurt? Please speak to me." Anna looked up at the stranger. He had a strong face, weathered by sun and wind, and a small, pale scar on his jaw. But his eyes were what held her. They were a soft brown, and they were filled with honest worry. For her. She slowly sat up, brushing the dust from her arms. Her heart was still beating too fast. I am all right," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "The wheel broke. I fell." "Let me help you," Elias said gently. He stood and offered her his hand. It was a large hand, calloused and strong from long days of work. Anna stared at it for a moment. A man's hand had not meant kindness to her in a very long time. But something in his quiet manner told her she could trust it. She placed her small hand in his, and he helped her to her feet with a careful strength, as if she were something fragile and precious. "My name is Elias Ward," he said, letting her hand go once she was steady. "I work at the ranch just west of here. Let me fix your wheel. It is the least I can do." He did not wait for an answer. He went to his horse, calming the big animal with a soft word, and then fetched a tool kit from his saddlebag. He set to work on the broken buggy. Anna watched him, her arms wrapped around herself. He worked with a quiet skill, his movements sure and steady. He did not try to make conversation. He just fixed what was broken. In that quiet space, Anna felt a strange feeling. A feeling of safety. This stranger, this ranch hand she had just collided with, had brought a sense of calm to her stormy world. He had apologized. He was helping. He was not demanding anything from her. When the wheel was fixed, solid and strong again, Elias turned to her. "It should get you to town now," he said. He picked up her bag from the dirt and handed it to her. Their fingers did not touch. "Thank you," Anna said, her voice a little stronger this time. "I am Anna Blythe, the new schoolteacher." A small, respectful smile touched Elias's lips. "Welcome to Cedar Ridge, Miss Blythe." He helped her back into the buggy seat, his hand barely touching her elbow. He tipped his hat, which he had found in the dust. "You travel safe now." Anna nodded and picked up the reins. As she urged the horse forward, she glanced back once. Elias Ward was still standing in the road, watching her go, making sure she was safe. The feeling of warmth stayed with her all the way into town. But old fears are hard to shake. She was grateful for his help, but she knew better than to lean on a stranger. She had learned the hard way that kindness could be a mask. So she tucked the memory of his gentle eyes away and promised herself she would rely on no one but herself from now on. It was the only way to stay safe. Anna hoped for peace in Cedar Ridge. She hoped the wide, open sky would mean open hearts. But she soon learned that in a small town, whispers travel faster than the wind. Her schoolhouse was a simple wooden building with a bell on top. The children who came to her were a bright bunch, their faces full of curiosity. There were 10 of them, from small ones just learning their letters to older boys and girls who helped their families on farms. Anna's gentle ways quickly won them over. She did not raise her voice. She helped them when they struggled. She made learning feel like a quiet adventure. But while the children's hearts were open, some of the grown-ups were not. After school, Anna would walk to the general store for supplies. She would see groups of women from the church, their heads close together. When she walked by, their chatter would stop. Then as she passed, the whispering would start again, like dry leaves skittering across the ground. She heard pieces of their talk. Where did she come from? One would ask. Why does a young woman like her travel alone? Another would wonder. She is so quiet. What is she hiding? They did not say these things to her face. They just let the questions hang in the air, a cloud of doubt that followed her everywhere. Anna felt their stares like little pinpricks on her back. She kept her head down and her heart guarded. She had come here to disappear, to be no one. But in a town this small, a new person was the most interesting thing to happen all year. Every day as she stood in front of her class, she felt a strange sense of being watched from outside. It was not a bad feeling, not like the whispers. It felt more like a shadow of safety. Sometimes, through the schoolhouse window, she would catch a glimpse of a man on a horse riding along the far ridge. The figure was too far away to see clearly, but something about the way he sat in the saddle seemed familiar. She did not know who it was, but a small, quiet part of her felt that someone was making sure she was all right. She did not dare to hope it was true. Strength does not always shout. For Elias Ward, strength was a quiet thing, built on hard work and a steady faith in God. His days started before the sun. He would milk the cows, mend the fences, and work with the horses. The ranch owner, an old man named Mr. Miller, had taken Elias in when he was a boy, after his parents passed away from a fever. Mr. Miller had taught him everything he knew. Because of this, Elias worked with a deep loyalty, not just for pay but out of love. He was a man of few words. The other ranch hands knew him as reliable and kind, but quiet. The scar on his jaw was from a tangle with a spooked horse years ago, a mark he carried without complaint. When the work was done, he would often sit on the porch of the small cabin he called home, reading his Bible. His faith was the anchor that held him firm in a world that could be rough and unpredictable. Lately, his thoughts were often on the new schoolteacher. He could not forget the sight of her on the road, her eyes filled with a fear he recognized. It was the look of someone who had been hurt and was trying very hard to be brave. He felt a powerful urge to protect her, to make sure that fear left her eyes for good. His daily ride along the ridge above the schoolhouse was not an accident. He told himself he was just checking the fence line. But he always seemed to check it at the same time the children were let out for the day. He would sit on his horse, watching from a distance as Miss Blythe saw the last child off. He saw how she looked around as if she felt the whispers of the town, and his heart ached for her. He knew he was drawn to her quiet spirit, but he was afraid of his own feelings. He was just a ranch hand, a simple man with nothing to offer but a strong back and a willing heart. He did not want to scare her or make her life more difficult. So he did not go to her. He did not try to talk to her. Instead, he did the only thing he knew would truly help. Every night, under a sky full of stars, Elias Ward bowed his head and prayed. He prayed for Anna Blythe's safety. He prayed for her heart to heal. And he prayed for God to show him how to help if he was meant to. Anna had started to believe she could build a new life. The children's laughter in the schoolhouse was a balm to her soul. The familiar rhythm of her days almost made her forget the ghost that chased her. But the past can chase harder than any outlaw, and it does not give up easily. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The last student had just scampered out the schoolhouse door, and Anna was wiping the chalkboard clean. The sound of a horse trotting into town was not unusual. But this one stopped right outside the small post office next to the school. The voice that called out was like a shard of ice plunged into her heart. The man's voice was smooth, but it carried an authority that demanded answers. "Afternoon," he said to Mr. Higgins, the postmaster. "I'm looking for someone. A young woman. She might have come through here recently. Her name is Anna." Anna froze. The chalk slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. She knew that voice. It belonged to Silas, the man her parents had promised her to. The man whose polite smiles in public hid a cruel and violent temper in private. The man she had run away from in the dead of night. She ducked below the windowsill, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she felt dizzy. She could hear Mr. Higgins mumble something she could not make out. Silas asked another question, his tone growing sharper. Anna squeezed her eyes shut, praying she would not be found. The world she had carefully built over the past few weeks felt as fragile as a soap bubble. She waited until she heard the horse move away before she dared to peek. She saw the rider, his fine clothes and proud posture making him stand out in the dusty street. He was not just asking, he was hunting. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in orange and purple, Anna lingered outside the schoolhouse, unable to make her feet carry her to her lonely cabin. She felt a panic so deep it was hard to breathe. What if he came back? What if he took her away? It was then that Elias appeared. He was not on his horse but walking as if he had just finished his work for the day. He saw her standing there, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, trembling like a leaf in the wind. "Miss Blythe?" he said, his voice soft with concern. "Are you unwell?" The kindness in his voice was her undoing. A tear escaped and traced a path through the dust on her cheek. She looked at him, at his honest face and worried eyes, and the wall around her heart cracked. "There is a man," she whispered, her voice shaking. "He is looking for me. He is not a good man." She could not bring herself to say more, to speak of the engagement, the threats, the fear that had been her constant companion. Elias did not press her for details. He did not ask why or how. He simply listened, his gaze never leaving her face. When her words faded into a quiet sob, he took a small step closer. "Miss Blythe," he said, his voice as steady as stone. "You are not alone in this. You hear me? You are not alone." It was a simple promise. But for Anna, it was a rope thrown to a drowning woman. She looked into his eyes and for the first time, she let herself believe it might be true. Fear grows deepest in the dark. But so does courage. That night, Anna lay in her narrow bed in the small cabin behind the school, listening to every sound. The wind whistling through the pine trees sounded like a warning. The call of a distant owl made her jump. Elias had believed her. He had not dismissed her fears. After they had spoken, he had simply nodded and walked away. She did not know that he had not gone back to the ranch. He had found a spot in the trees, just within sight of her cabin door. He had rolled out his bedroll on the hard ground, his rifle by his side. He had made a promise, and Elias Ward was a man who kept his promises. Anna must have finally fallen into a fitful sleep, because the sound of splintering wood jolted her awake. A rock, wrapped in a crude note, had been thrown through her small kitchen window. Glass shards glittered on her floor like evil stars. Her breath caught in her throat. She could hear muffled voices outside, men talking in low, rough tones. "Come on out, girl," one of them grunted. "We just want to talk." She scrambled back into the corner of her room, pulling the blanket over her head, a child's gesture of hiding from a monster. This was it. Silas had found her. Suddenly a new voice cut through the night. It was calm, but it carried a power that made the air itself seem to still. "You men are on the wrong side of town," Elias said. "I suggest you leave. Now." Anna crept to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. She saw Elias standing between her cabin and two rough-looking men. He held his rifle, not pointed at them but ready. The moonlight glinted off the scar on his jaw. One of the men laughed, a nasty sound. "This is none of your business, cowboy." "It became my business when you broke that window," Elias replied, his voice never rising. "The lady wants no company. You will turn around and ride out." There was a tense silence. Anna saw one of the men move his hand toward his hip. But Elias stood firm, a solid shadow in the night. He did not threaten. He did not shout. He simply stood as an unmovable wall between her and the danger. The men seemed to realize that this quiet ranch hand was not someone they could easily push aside. After a moment, they muttered curses under their breath, mounted their horses and rode off into the darkness. When the sound of their horses faded, Anna rushed to her door and pulled it open. Elias was still there, turning to check on her. In the pale moonlight, she could see a dark bruise already forming on his cheekbone. He must have been struck during the brief confrontation. Tears filled her eyes, but they were not just tears of fear. They were tears of a gratitude so profound it shook her to her core. This man who owed her nothing had slept on the cold ground to protect her. He had faced down danger for her. "You are hurt," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Elias gave her a small, tired smile. "It is nothing, Miss Blythe." "Why?" she asked, the question bursting from her. "Why would you do this for me?" He looked at her, his gaze clear and sure in the moonlight. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said simply. "And I would do it again." Without a second thought. When danger comes to a small town, true hearts show themselves. The next morning, the broken window of the schoolteacher's cabin was the talk of Cedar Ridge. The story of the men in the night and Elias Ward standing guard spread from the general store to the church steps. Anna could feel the change in the air. Some folks looked at her with new sympathy. Mrs. Gable, the pastor's wife, brought her a fresh baked pie and patted her hand. A few of the fathers whose children she taught nodded to her with grim respect. They saw a single woman bravely trying to do her job, and they saw the trouble that had come to find her. But not all hearts were so kind. Later that day, as Anna was sweeping the glass from her floor, she heard loud voices outside. She peeked out and saw a big man named Jed Carlson, who owned the livery stable, standing toe-to-toe with Elias. Jed's face was red and angry. "This is what we get," Jed shouted, waving a hand toward Anna's cabin. "We get a stranger bringing her problems here. Now we have rough men breaking windows in the night. My family lives here, Ward. We do not need this kind of trouble." Elias stood calmly, but his shoulders were set. "The trouble is not her, Jed. The trouble is the men who broke the window. She is the one who was frightened." "Do not be a fool," Jed spat. "She is the cause of it. We are a peaceful town. We should send her packing before real trouble starts." Anna's heart sank. This was her fear coming true. She was causing a split in the town she had hoped to call home. She wanted to hide, to disappear. But then she saw Elias standing up for her, and a spark of courage lit inside her. She walked out of her cabin, her head held high. Both men turned to look at her. "Mr. Carlson," she said, her voice quiet but clear, "I am sorry for the trouble. I want only peace. I want only to teach the children. That is all I have ever wanted." Jed looked away, grumbling, but some of the anger seemed to leave him. He stomped off without another word. On Sunday, the pastor spoke about compassion and not turning away those in need. After the service, a few of the women who had whispered before came up to Anna. Their faces were softer. They had seen her quiet strength. They had seen she was not looking for trouble but running from it. They began to see her as a person, not just a problem. But Anna knew that not everyone agreed. She saw the hard looks from a few others. The town was divided, and her safety felt as fragile as the new glass in her window. Evil often smiles before it strikes. 3 days after the broken window, a fine black carriage rolled into Cedar Ridge. It was polished and shiny, pulled by 2 beautiful matching horses. It stopped right in the middle of the main street. The man who stepped out was dressed in a fine suit. He was handsome, with slicked back hair and a smile that did not reach his cold eyes. It was Silas. Anna was coming out of the schoolhouse when she saw him. Her blood ran cold. She froze on the steps, unable to move, unable to breathe. Silas saw her and his smile widened. He walked toward her, his steps slow and confident. A small crowd began to gather, curious about the fancy stranger. "Anna, my dear," he said, his voice smooth as honey. He spoke loudly so everyone could hear. "There you are. We have all been so worried sick about you." He turned to the townsfolk, playing the part of a concerned gentleman. "You must forgive my fiancée," he said, shaking his head with a sad expression. "She has not been herself lately. Her mind, it gets confused. She ran away from home, from the care of her family and doctors. We just want to get her the help she needs." A murmur went through the crowd. Some people looked at Anna with new doubt. Silas was so polite, so well-dressed. He sounded so believable. Anna felt the world spinning. She wanted to scream that he was lying, but the words were trapped in her throat by old fear. Then a solid figure moved to stand between her and Silas. It was Elias. He had come from the blacksmith's shop, his hands still dusty from work. "She said she does not want to go with you," Elias said, his voice low and firm. Silas's friendly mask slipped for just a second. His eyes narrowed at Elias. Then the smile was back. "And who are you?" he asked, his tone lightly amused. "This is a private family matter. You have no place here." "I am making it my place," Elias replied, not moving an inch. Silas looked from Elias to Anna, his gaze lingering on her frightened face. The threat in his eyes was clear, even if his voice was still pleasant. "I see she has found friends to fill her head with stories," he said softly, so only Elias and Anna could hear. Then to the crowd he announced, "I will be staying at the hotel. I will give my poor Anna 3 days to rest and remember her senses. Then we will be leaving together." He tipped his hat to the crowd, got back into his fine carriage and drove away. The town was left in a stunned silence. Anna stood trembling on the schoolhouse steps. Elias turned to her, his face set like stone. "He will not take you," Elias vowed, his words a quiet promise in the uneasy air. "I will not let him." When the storm rises, you hold tighter to God or you fall. The 3 days Silas had given them felt like a heavy blanket smothering the whole town. The sky seemed to agree with the mood. Thick, gray clouds rolled in, and a cold rain began to fall, tapping a lonely rhythm on the schoolhouse roof. On the second night, with the rain still pouring, Anna could not stay in her cabin. The walls felt like they were closing in. She pulled a shawl over her head and ran through the mud to the church. It was dark and empty, but it felt like the only safe place. She was not alone for long. The door creaked open and Elias stepped inside, his clothes damp from the rain. He had been watching over her, even in this weather. "I saw you come in," he said softly, his voice echoing a little in the quiet space. Anna was kneeling at the front, her head bowed. She did not look up. "I do not know what to pray for any more," she whispered. "I am so tired of being afraid." Elias came and knelt beside her, not too close, but near enough that she could feel his calm presence. "Then do not pray with words," he said. "Just sit. He knows your heart." They stayed like that for a long time, the only sound the rain on the roof. In the quiet, with Elias beside her, Anna felt a strange peace settle over her frantic heart. "I have never felt safe," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was raw. "Not in my parents' house, not ever. Until I came here. Until you." She looked at him, her eyes glistening in the dim light. "You have been my safe place, Elias." Elias's own heart felt too big for his chest. "God brought you here for a reason, Anna," he told her, his voice sure. "This town needs your gentle heart. Those children need you. This is where you are meant to be." Just then they both heard it. The sound of horses moving fast through the muddy street, their hooves making a sucking sound in the rain. The sound stopped near the schoolhouse. The danger was here. "No." Elias stood up, his face becoming serious. "We need to go. No. I can get you to the ranch. You will be safe there." But Anna shook her head. A new strength, forged in the quiet of the church, filled her. She stood up, straightening her shoulders. "No," she said. Her voice did not tremble. "I will not run again. This is my home. I will not let him chase me from it. God gives quiet hearts mighty strength when it is time to fight." The rain stopped just before dawn, leaving the world washed clean and silent. As the first light of day touched the sky, Silas and his 2 men rode toward the schoolhouse. They meant to take Anna by force, to drag her from her home before the town was fully awake. But the town was already awake. Silas pulled up short. There, standing in the muddy street in front of Anna's cabin, was Elias. And he was not alone. Behind him stood Pastor Gable, his Bible in his hand. Next to him was Mr. Miller, the old ranch owner, holding a rifle. A few other men from the town, fathers of the children Anna taught, stood with them. They held tools and rifles. Their faces were grim. Anna stood on the porch of her cabin, right behind Elias. She did not hide. Silas laughed, but it was a nervous sound. "What is this?" he called out. "A party? I am just here to collect what is mine." "She is not yours," Elias said. His voice was calm but carried in the morning air. "She is under the protection of this town now. You will turn around and leave." Silas's face twisted with anger. He looked at the line of men. "You would fight for this stranger? This confused woman?" "We would," Pastor Gable said firmly. "We fight for what is right." The 2 men with Silas looked uneasy, seeing the determined faces staring back at them. Just as Silas seemed to be deciding whether to charge, the sound of a horse galloping hard came from the other end of the street. It was the sheriff from the next county over. He reined in his horse, his badge gleaming in the new sun. He looked at Silas, then at the gathered townsfolk. "Silas Granger," the sheriff said loudly. "I have been looking for you. There is a warrant for your arrest. For theft from your business partners. And now for the attempted kidnapping of this woman." Silas's face went pale. His smooth talk and fine clothes could not save him now. It was over. The sheriff took Silas and his men away. The tension broke like a snapped string. The men of the town lowered their tools, their shoulders slumping with relief. Anna felt her legs go weak. The fear that had been her shadow for so long finally loosened its grip. She covered her face with her hands and wept, great sobs of relief and freedom. She was free. Truly free. The town gathered around her, no longer divided. They had seen her stand firm. They had seen her strength. And they had stood with her. They were no longer just a town she lived in. They were her home. Healing is slow. It is like a garden after a long winter. You cannot rush the green shoots. You must simply tend to them with patience and care, trusting the sun to do its work. Peace returned to Cedar Ridge. It was a deeper peace than before, a peace that had been tested and made stronger. In the schoolhouse, the children's voices were a little brighter. They brought Anna wildflowers they picked from the fields and placed them in a jar on her desk. The parents now looked at her with warm respect, no longer seeing a stranger, but seeing their children's beloved teacher. Elias still visited often. He would come by after his work was done, when the afternoon sun was turning the sky to gold. At first, he would just stand at the schoolhouse fence talking to her about the weather or the children. Then he started walking her back to her cabin in the evenings. Their walks were quiet, filled with the comfortable silence of two people who no longer needed to hide their hearts. One such evening, as they stood by her door, Elias took a deep breath. His hands were shoved in his pockets, and he looked at her with a shy hope in his eyes. "Anna," he began, his voice gentle. "I was wondering, if you would allow it, if I might court you. Properly. Slowly. Only when you are ready." Anna looked at this good man. This man who had been her safe place from the very first day they had collided on a dusty road. He had never asked for anything. He had only ever given her his protection, his friendship, and his quiet, steady heart. A soft smile touched her lips, a real smile, one that reached all the way to her eyes and lit up her whole face. It was a smile he had waited a long time to see. "Elias," she said, her voice full of a quiet joy, "I do not need to wait to be ready. I already feel safe with you. I already feel at home." Elias's own smile was like the sun breaking through the clouds. He did not take her hand, not yet. But he offered her his arm and she took it, her hand resting lightly in the crook of his elbow. Together they turned and walked toward the schoolhouse, which stood bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. Their hands were close, their shoulders almost touching. They were not rushing. They were simply walking forward, two hearts, once broken, now learning the gentle ways of peace and love, held safe in the grace of a faithful God. If you found peace in Anna and Elias's journey, if your heart was warmed by this story of quiet strength and redemption, then please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more of these heartfelt Western tales to you. God bless, and we will see you in the next story.